The way starts with justice. If you start with punishment, you are far from the way. Why? Because you are going to target the doubly victims, the poor and very often the women. So by starting with a very narrow understanding of the law, without putting the law in the light of the way, so you need to have both a vision and laws in the light of the vision. Because it's a step by step. So this is so important. And it shapes a mindset, it shapes an understanding. The last thing is once again quite important, is that there is a distinction, but there is a couple here that we never have to forget and confuse, but we also have to connect them, is rules and meanings. Why is it important? Because very often when you are dealing with rules, you may come to a point where you are so obsessed with the rules and ahkam that you forget the meaning. You want an example? Every one of us. Every one of us. We hear that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala once called Musa alayhi salam, and he told him, Innani an Allah, la ilaha illa ana, fa'budni wa aqim as-salata li dhikri. I am the only God. There is no other God by me. Worship me and perform the prayer in order to remember me. And we in our life, we know that we have to pray. And sometimes our body is praying and our heart is forgetting. You get the point? We know the rule, but we forget the meaning. And this could be in our life, in praying. Even in praying it could happen. What about someone who is dealing with the text and the rules and he can forget the meaning? This is where we become to distinguish between a religion of rules, why it should be a religion connecting spirituality with rules, the meanings and the means, the meanings and the rules. The rules are not ends per se, they are means for meanings. وَأَقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ لِذِكْرِ. We pray not only to pray, but we pray to remember. If you pray and you forget, there is something which is lacking in your prayer. You can respect the rules, but you miss the point. So these are things that are so important for couples, to distinguish, not to confuse, but still to connect them. The first one is the context and the text, the second principles and model, the third one is laws and way, and the last one is rules and meanings. Why am I saying this again? Because all this is helping us to start and to, okay, now we are clarifying, we understand what we want to do, is to remain faithful, to go ahead, but we have a framework. Now, very quickly, I'm sorry, if you give me 10 minutes still? Is that okay? Because I'm half of my way as a good Swiss citizen. So, no, very quickly. With all this, we have to ask now a question. We want to remain faithful, we want to go ahead, we have the framework and we understand what we should not confuse and what we should not forget. Now we have to ask ourselves which kind of reform we want. As I told you, is reforming the minds, is reforming our understanding, is not to reform Islam, knowing that at the end of the day, tajdeed ad-din means that we will have new responses and new rules, of course. And then we have, many of the words that are the concepts that we have in Islam. We should go through the spiritual dimension to understand the deep meaning of them. It's exactly with jihad, is exactly this. You know jihad? If you want to understand the very meaning of jihad, go through the jihad in-nafs. You will get the very deep teaching. Is that in fact jihad is this effort, this resistance to reform your own self by using the qualities that you have to master the weaknesses that you feel, that you know you have. Violence, or greediness, anything that you know it's the dark side, not going too far on that, the dark side of our personality. So the spiritual dimension of jihad is helping us to know how we have to deal with jihad in the outside world, resist discriminations, they resist oppression. This is what we are doing. It's a resistance and a reform. Now, if you come to the very essence of our spirituality, is to do what? What Allah is expecting from us. When He's telling us, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اسْتَجِيبُوا, respond. O you who believe, respond. Respond to what? To a call. This call is giving you life. استجيبوا لله وللرسول إذا دعاكم. Da'wah, it's a call to what gives you life. And know that the knowledge of Allah, وَعَلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَحُولُ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَقَلْبِهِ, that the knowledge of Allah is between you and your own heart. But this call is to do what? Is to reform yourself. Islah al-nafs. You have to change yourself. You are to come close to Allah. وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِ عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. I'm close. I'm close to every single heart. What are we expected to do? To go through this spiritual journey to do what? To transform ourselves. To transform ourselves means it's a reform process. Spirituality is about reform yourself. Islah nafsak. Islah al-nafs. But Islah al-nafs means you have to transform yourself, not to adapt yourself to the bad temptations that you have. It's to master them in order to transform. It's an ongoing process of transformation, isn't it? This is spirituality. Spirituality is about transformation. So, you know what? When I was writing these books about the Prophet, this became so clear for me that this was the essence of Islam. It's all about reforming to transform. And then, it should be exactly the same with the world, isn't it? That you reform the world in order to transform the world for the better. What you do with your heart, you do it with the world, isn't it? For 20 years, you know, my specialization when I was with scholars in Egypt was very much about fiqh and usul al-fiqh, and I was very much involved with all, you know, I had a teacher, we went through 63 mawda' ikhtilaf between the scholars where they disagree on fiqh. It was all about this. And then usul al-fiqh, you know, when it was really about al-fiqh, well, al-mu'amalat and all that. And for 20 years, I've been working and talking with scholars. And then at one point, I realized that we are using the same word, but we don't mean the same thing. We are using al-islah and reform as a concept. But for the people who are dealing with fiqh, law and jurisprudence, for the people who are dealing with law and jurisprudence, reform means, in fact, to adapt yourself to the world. In fact, you have a world which is changing, the world is changing, and you go with the fiqh and you try to find solution. So you adapt. You adapt yourself to the world. So this is al-fatwa, it's coming, we have a new challenge. We need a legal opinion. Give me a legal opinion on that. This is new. So I'm adapting. And you will see that in the current discussions among the ulama, there are two words that are coming quite always, is الضرورة والحاجة. الضرورة, it's a necessity. We cannot do without it. So in the name of الضرورة, give me a fatwa, which is helping me in the world of global economy. I want to buy my house. ضرورة. Or حاجة. Haja, I mean that it's a need. I need it because the world is like this. We were using which word to do that? El-tajdeed, el-ijtihad, wa el-islah. It's all about reform. And the point for me, I was asking myself, why is it that after 150 years, when all the scholars are talking about ijtihad, islah, we are still stuck with no way to change the world? Because this is where we are not in agreement. What I understood from Islah is exactly what I understood with Islah al-Nafs, is to transform the world for the better. And to transform the world for the better means that we have to go from an adaptational reform to a transformational reform. It's to say we are not here to adapt ourselves to the world, and as the Americans have the best civilization, the best or the more developed civilization, we in Malaysia, we are going to run after it and to have towers as tall as they have. I don't like this mindset that we are catching up. Great buildings, success is great buildings. This is adaptation, is not transformation. So the mindset here is problematic. Why? Because it's really where, as reformers, we need to understand the very meaning of reform. If you deal with the legal dimension, you are dealing with adaptation by definition. Any one of you who has studied law know that when you are in law and jurisprudence, it's all adapting, trying to find the solution. So we are always behind the reality. If you want a transformational reform, you need to have a vision beyond the reality. Is what we want to achieve. Meaning by this, what are al-maqasid, the objectives beyond what we want. The world is like this. We know it's like this, but this is not what we want. We want the world to be like that. So we think about the world the way it is, the way we want it to be, and the process between the way it is and the way we want it to be. But we need to have to master the knowledge of the way it is and to have a vision for what we want it to be. If you don't have this, you're just catching up. And say, yes, we are moving, that's fine. And between one darura and one haja and one other darura, we're just adapting ourselves. It's a very light way of dealing with our religion. And you will see that some of the scholars today are saying, we have, and this is the way we can discuss, a taysir, that's fine, to facilitate this is Islamic. We need to go through this. We need to go through it. Are we going to stop to it, on it? Is this the final point? For some, it's just a tasahul.